All right, folks, we're going to start here on the author new route plus view. Step 1, create a new route in authors controller JS. And we're going to start writing just enough code to get a res.send working. So I like to test out like the server-side code, make sure that I'm querying the database correctly and successfully before I start dealing with a view, because just a little bit easier that way. So this is the route we're going to try. We're going to do a get request of /new. Remember that we're kind of namespacing or prefixing all of our routes with authors. So here I only need /new, and Express knows that it's listening for requests to authors /new. And just to recap, right here in server.js, right here on line 16, app.use. So anytime our Express and Node application, it's listening for requests. Anytime it gets a request going to /authors, it's going to go into authors controller to find the appropriate route for the request. So we pasted this route into our app, and now if we refresh, let's go to /new and see what's happening. So yeah, we just want this goofy little message saying that new is working, just to make sure that the route and everything is set up correctly. So that looks good. So let's move forward. So now we're going to replace the res.send with the res.render. So now instead of sending this string, we're going to render our new view. And notice that we don't even have a new view yet. So we're doing a little bit of error-driven development. So if I refresh, you guys should see an error, and we want you to get really comfortable with error messages. And this was pretty straightforward. It says failed to look up view authors /new in views directory. So essentially this is saying, hey, I'm looking for a new view within the authors folder, but dude, you gotta build it first. So that's good. And if you follow the errors, it kind of like leads you down a happy path. Like it will tell you what it's expecting next. So if you get comfortable with your errors, it's a nice little guide. So now we're at step 3. Let's create that view for our authors. And again, I'm just going to put enough code into this view to make sure that it's working before I try to like add handlebars and try to add the data. So I'm just going to add this really goofy H1. The author new view is rendering. So now if I refresh again, cool. So you guys should be seeing this right under here. And remember that all of this other code is coming from the layout.hbs, right? The only thing that we actually have in this new view is this H1 with some content inside it. All of this other cool stuff is coming from layout.hbs. So layout.hbs right here in this body, the handlebars body tags right here, that's where it's inserting the contents of my new.hbs. And right now the content is pretty sparse. It's just this H1 right there. Cool. Oops, let me get out of that. Step 5. So new and edit views generally contain a form. So a new view contains an empty form, and an edit, remember, contains that same form, but it usually includes the information for whatever we're trying to edit. So we're going to grab this form information and put it into new. I'm just going to get rid of that H1 stuff. So let me refresh, and we should see a nice form in here. And we do. It's pretty bare bones. We just have one input box here. Great. So let's hit submit, and we should see an error. So if I put in Mark and then hit submit, then we should see an error, cannot post /authors. So this is a good error. This error is coming because we're telling our form when we hit submit that we want to go to the /authors route or action, and we're sending it with a post HTTP method. And so that's exactly what our form's doing. So our form is behaving correctly. We just need to add our create route. So let's do that now. So we're going to add some code for our create route. We'll do this in authors controller. I'll just put it below the new right here. So this is going to be a router.post. So we're using Express router, which we defined right here. So we're adding all of our routes and such. We're attaching it to the router. And remember that we're exporting the router down here at the bottom. So that's the object that we're were exported from this file. Let me clean that up just a tad. Okay. So we're calling router.post, and this is going to just the /authors route. We have our request and response objects. So I'm going to instantiate a new author. I'm going to create a new object right here. The name for this new author is going to be from the request.body.name field, which is actually the only field we have in our form right now. And it's this input form right here, input field. And then the reminders are in here, although we're not really adding reminders yet, via the form anyway. We'll be doing that in the next few steps. Then once I create a new author, remember we need to do new and then save to persist it. So down here, once I hit save, I'm going to console log the new object, and then I'm going to send the new object to my browser, again, just to confirm that this is working correctly. So let me refresh that and hit continue. And there we go. So it did create a new object ID for my MARC document. And I know that it's persisted in the database if I wanted to check it out. But let's flesh it out with the redirect to complete this. So remember that the create or the post method does not have a view associated with it. So we're going to need to tell Express where to route our request or the response after it new and saves to the database. So we're going to redirect it to the index view for authors. So we're actually sending it right back up right here. And again, don't let this confuse you. So remember that kind of the root route to get all the authors is indeed /authors. And we're getting /authors from our server.js file, because this is the main entry point to all of our authors routes. Remember, it's this /authors. So I'm going to test that out one more time. I'm going to create a new author and do Andrew, my first name, hit submit, and there we go. So now I have Mark, I have Andrew, and it just went ahead and sent me to the index view, which is the view for all of my authors, for all of my instances or whatever model or resource that I'm playing around with. Cool, let's go ahead and knock this one out, and then I will pause the video. So let's add a show route and a view for our authors. So this is the route. This is really important too. I'll put this in a README. Make sure your show route is below your new route. So the order of the routes do matter, because when a request comes in, Express is going to try to match the params of the request, and it's going to send it to the first route it matches. So remember that :ID, it's kind of a wild card. So :ID is just going to accept anything. Now, ideally, we want this to be one of these crazy object IDs that Mongo gives us. However, if :ID was above /new, this NEW, these characters, are going to hit this route, because this is like literally pretty much anything after this /, it's going to try to hit this route. Anything with a GET request to this :ID. So we just want to make sure that new is above this route. If you don't do it, you're going to get an error, and that's the reason why you're going to get an error. So let's refresh. And everything's cool. We don't have links. Well, I think these should be working. Okay, yeah, they are wired up because we already put them in our index.hps. So right here, you can see that we're creating links for each author. So if we click on an author, it'll take us to the show page. So this is good. Again, we're just doing a res.send right now to send the JSON data back to the browser. The next thing we're going to need to do is add a view. So we're going to want to put this res.render into our route. So right here, we're console logging author. You can see that here as well in our NodeMon server logs. And then we're also sending that object back to the browser. I'm going to replace this with a render. Let's do this a little bit more properly. So now I need to create that show view. I'll do that here. I'm going to create an author's show view. And then here's the code for the show. And I'll put that into the show file like so. Cool. And now when I refresh, you should see something like this. So I clicked on Bob, so I seeded earlier, we seeded two reminders, and this is what we should see.